Yo, that mic clip is bad. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, whenever and wherever you are in the world. If you're looking for the place to be this Wednesday evening, look no further. You've found it. Dude, that drop was perfect. The music cut right out as I was like delivering the punchline, or what I'll call the punchline on that line. We've got 2 million of you guys tuning in. Welcome to week number 7 of the Midweek Hang. We are almost at 2 months. That is crazy. Got the windows opened up, got the guitars over here. We got some fun guitar news to talk about, actually, since last week. So, Joshua, what's up? Ais4Drew. The sun could not come up tomorrow, and Joshua would still come to the Mechanyx streams. That would be how I would have some sense of regularity in my life, because we always want to have one or two things. There's one or two things that you're always like, oh yeah, the sun will still come up tomorrow. Like, that's a regular thing. Joshua showing up to Mechanyx streams, that's a regular thing for me. That's what gives my life order and gives me some consistency that I so badly need. So good to see you, Josh. Great seeing you. So I hate to kick things off on a bummer, but there was some really bad news today. Breaking news. There was a shooting at a local, or not a local high school, but a shooting at a high school in Georgia. I believe it's Apalachee High School. And it's just an issue that's really, really close to me because I work with teenagers through youth ministry and stuff like that. So I want to take just a moment of silence to kick things off, to kind of just put everybody into a mindful mood to think about these sort of things, and the kids that were injured or lost their lives today, and the adults. I haven't looked too much into it because it's been frustrating, but let's just take a minute. Let's take a minute to pray and to think and just remember those who have maybe been hurt today. Thank you. So, Walt Whitman once said that he sounded his yop across the rooftops of the world. And that word yop is meant to mean like a frustrated groan, or like a very powerful groan, or there's a number of interpretations. That's a very famous Walt Whitman line. But I kind of want to talk about this. And it's. Hold on, I'm getting my timesheet started here. I want to choose my words wisely, but I also want to be candid here, because there's a lot of people that will shy away from these sort of topics. And by all means, I should say this with a preface that if you are somebody that has, had experience with gun violence, or, know somebody that has experience with gun violence, or the idea of, gun violence or school shootings is something that's upsetting to you, I want to make sure that you have a way out. So we're going to be talking about this for about the next 15 or 20 minutes, maybe at the most. So if you need to go to another place and kind of be in a better headspace and you don't want to tackle that heavy of a topic right now, totally get it. Do what you got to do. But I need to sound my yacht because I am frustrated, guys. And this is a problem that I don't think really has a solution yet, but I think one of the ways that we're not going to find a solution is if we don't talk about these sort of things. And I'm not saying that like we provide coverage on it and everything, because we certainly should. We should provide coverage about these sort of things to make people aware, but there's a lot of really insidious things at play here. I think my sibling put it into perspective. Gun violence is a very regular thing here in the United States. I'm sure that's a meme. We get that a lot. And I've been thinking about this for a little bit and what I wanted to say and everything. And I've been thinking about like the geopolitical sort of aspects to this. I've been thinking about like the self-censorship and how we approach these sort of topics and how we talk about them. I'm thinking about even just the toll that happens to these young men and women when you go to school one day and then you are left traumatized for the rest of your life, basically, because of something like this. And again, not a lot of people are talking about this. This video, once it goes up on YouTube, is probably going to get flagged and demonetized. I'm going to make sure to put a flag, or not a flag at the beginning, but like a little warning card at the beginning to, jump to timestamp and everything like that. But platforms like YouTube, TikTok, all these sort of stuff have demonstrated that they don't want you talking about these sort of things. They don't want you having these hard conversations about school shootings and gun violence and death and that sort of thing. And I'm not saying that to be conspiratorial. I'm not saying that there's a big thing at play here because I can't prove that. And I'm not going to put anything in front of you that I can't prove empirically. So, but beyond that, we still need to have these conversations and we need to have them in a good place and a good space that is conducive and everything. So I understand where a platform might not want to talk about these sort of things. And there are people who will make light of these sort of things, make jokes and everything, and that's completely unacceptable. But this video or this sort of stream, I wanted to just have a candid conversation about these sort of things and give you guys some of my opinions, and maybe we can commiserate a little bit and sound our frustrations a little bit about this whole ordeal. So there was a school shooting in Georgia, 4 kids dead, 9 injured, or 4 people injured, or 4 people dead, 9 people injured. I don't know if they were students, I don't know if they were staff or faculty, that's the sort of thing. And I feel like it might be conducive to those of you that are outside the United States because there is some true, I don't want to say there's truth to the meme, but there is some dark truth to the meme that America has this stereotype that we have a lot of school shootings because we do. And we have a lot of gun violence because we do. And it really hit me hard because, one, I was talking about my sibling. My sibling put it into perspective that there are things that we don't hear about. There's things that are so frequent, like these things are becoming so frequent now that newscasters just stop covering it. There's so many like gun violence related things and so many, some of them happen on school grounds that we don't hear about, or they just kind of get brushed over and stuff like that. And then you have these massive shootings and stuff like that that happen, and then they do get widespread coverage, and then we'll talk about the impact of that here in just a second. But we need to stop and we need to have a really hard conversation and evaluate these sort of things because it's affecting everybody. It's affecting pretty much it is at a everybody or every young woman, every young man sort of level. I've worked with a lot of kids and I've worked with a lot of teenagers that in the back of their head that is a concern. Like they're concerned that they will go to school and there will be somebody that is disgruntled or, frustrated or that sort of thing, and they will very likely end somebody's life and like maybe end their own life and cause violence through guns or other means as a means to cope or try to kind of get out of the frustrations or the bullying or the anxiety that they're feeling each and every day. So to paint a picture, to give you guys some perspective, here in the United States, we have elementary, middle, and high school. High school usually begins around ninth grade and finishes at 12th grade, but there are some schools that go 10th to 12th, and then ninth grade is just your last year of middle school. But high school here in the United States, for the most part, is 9 through 12. So from the ages about 13 to 14 to 17 to 18. Very, very formative years of your life. You are learning a lot about yourself. You're learning a lot about the people around you. And for all intents and purposes, it's basically a petri dish. It's a social petri dish. You have all these hormonal teenagers. You put them into somewhat of a confined space, that is a building, housing hundreds or even on the order of thousands of students. In my example, I went to a school here in Texas, and everything is bigger in Texas, as they say. And the school that I graduated from, their total student population was about 3,000. I think nowadays it's closer to 4,000. My graduating class started with about 920, and I finished with 720. So I graduated with a class of 700 other teenagers, to give you some perspective. A lot of kids, a lot of hormones, a lot of things going on. You're growing up, you're learning about anxiety, depression, how to regulate yourself emotionally, and like all the while trying to figure out what you're going to do with the rest of your life. And I'm not here to pontificate or talk about, the shortcomings of the American education system. That could be a whole nother 2-hour video. But one thing that will become very apparent when you go to American high schools is the presence of what are known as school resource officers, or SROs. And school resource officers are typically police. They are badged and uniformed police officers carrying guns and tasers and the full kit of what a police officer would carry. And they are charged with being a school resource for everything from just promoting good police work and promoting trust in the police department and everything like that, to a lot of the times they would like stop by classes and just kind of cut up with the kids and hang out. I remember my high school history class, or my government class, my senior year, one of our SROs would come in and just yak with the my history teacher at the time, and all that's going on. And so there's that. That's on the other end. But on the other side, they are charged with whenever there are criminal offenses, or, something, let's say something really, really bad goes out the wazoo, then they can do police work and, file reports. And, obviously when you're dealing with juveniles, it's a little bit different with how you go about things, but they have their cuffs, they have their tasers, they have everything that they need to perform arrests and police work if the need should arise. They are not armed with like long guns or long rifles or anything that could probably be effective outside of 100 meters, probably. It's mostly just standard issue sidearms and tasers and stuff like that. So, all besides, and again, talking about the shortcomings of American education, a lot of people will say that American education is conditioning kids for prison, basically, because you're told when to go. There's a bell that releases you, a bell that like starts your day and everything like that. That's a long shot, though. I don't always believe in that. I think it's not as cynical, but I can see the argument for it. But you have police presence at these high schools and everything like that. And to a certain extent, that will promote the peace. But now you get into an active shooter situation or an active sort of threat situation. You can't have students, or you can't have police with like long guns on school property, obviously, because when it comes to that sort of things, they have to be secured and everything like that. I wouldn't want AR-15s or fully automatic rifles inside of my school for police use only, because that's just opening the door to a lot of things. So really the only firearms that you have available to you are what you have on your holster. So yeah, let's say you come into an active shooter situation, everything like that, it's going to be very, very difficult for those school resource officers to be able to fix or like resolve the incident and everything like that. And yeah, so all that's to say, American education, when I was in high school, we had school resource officers and everything like that. There was police presence and everything like that. But you have to really question the effectiveness of something like that in an active threat or an active shooter situation. And this is going to be like a discussion throughout the entire through lines of this sort of thing, is like, this isn't a gun control issue. This isn't a school resource officer issue. There's no one unilateral fix for this. But every time that I sit and I think about how I went through high school, and like I was kind of happy-go-lucky, and back in my day, school shootings were like a no-no. You didn't talk about those sort of things. It was kind of like Columbine was the only one that happened, and like whenever anybody would bring up Columbine, everybody would kind of just like look at you and be like, "Wait, did you just talk about that? Like we don't talk about that sort of thing. That's taboo." But nowadays it's so frequent that the news isn't even covering it because there's so many that happen. Um, and so yeah, there's that. And so nowadays you have teens that are going to it, and it's a topic that is very prevalent, either in the subconscious or the full conscious. Typically, whenever these sort of events happen, it'll flare up. Like, I can't imagine being a teenager right now. Like, I cannot, for the life of me, with social media and how it's destroyed the attention span of just about every person under the age of 18 in this country. So, hey, bud, what's up, Muffin? How's it going? We're talking a little bit heavier, and Muffin, you may be able to chime in as a law enforcement professional, but we're talking a little bit about the events and what's been going on in the news and what happened today. And I just kind of want to talk about those sort of things because I'm frustrated about these sort of things. I'm good, man. I'm feeling good. I'm vibing. I mean, the news kind of got me down a little bit, but we're here. We're talking it out. It is a little bit of a heavier topic, so if any of you guys like have been affected by gun violence or that sort of thing, feel free. You don't have to stay here. But I'm just kind of airing out my frustrations because I work with the youth and I work with the young adults, and it's just frustrating when these sort of things happen. So social media has absolutely blasted these kids. Anybody under the age of 18 probably now has an absolutely shot attention span. They have all these different Arrowway. Very good. Cool. So if you just want to chime in from your side of things here, Muffin. But I was talking about school resource officers and the efficacy of that and everything like that. But the yeah, kids are anxious. They have body image issues. They have all these sort of things. And then every day that they go to school, in the back of their head, they're worried about if there's going to be an open or active shooter threat. And then whenever you see the news and stuff like that, where there's a school shooting, it's like, okay, now that's at the forefront. That's going to be what I'm going to worry about for the next 3 days. Like every time that I'm going to school, you're worrying about a copycat killer or a copycat person because that is a thing. It's proven that in cases of like serial murder and serial killers and stuff like that, copycats can be a thing. People feed off of the notoriety of one case and they'll try and mimic it because they're sick and demented. So, a lot, I don't know the correlation with school or active shooter situations, but especially with like serial murder and serial killers and stuff like that, there's always been a prevalence of like copycat killers, and that is a thing that can happen. But yeah, so you have a bunch of kids that are anxious and everything, and more than anything, I want you guys, when you see these sort of things, just think about the kids. Pray for the kids, pray for the teens, pray for the teachers that have to like go in every day and they have to be trained on active shooter training. Pray for the SROs and like the first responders that have to respond to these sort of things. Sandy Hook was a copycat, and every other one is a copycat of each other. Absolutely. Welcome in, Rocket Guy. You're absolutely right. And some of these kids will, you know, be beside themselves and they'll be anxious and everything like that. You do not come away from a school shooting. You do not come away from like gun violence in the next city over without being just a little bit traumatized. So there was a shooting in Allen, Texas, not too far from where I live, and some people, I'm not going to name names, were had family members involved in that active shooter situation. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. That was right down the road. I could drive 10 minutes and be where that happened. And that got me rattled because again, you're thinking about copycats and things like that, and it's just like you hear about all these things on the news, and then it happens right down next door. And then imagine that it's like a school in your district, or it's a school that you guys have played because you guys are in the same district. Like your football team is playing that football team next week, but that game isn't going to happen because they just had an active shooter. So you do not come away from a situation like that without being completely and utterly traumatized, even if you didn't go to the school directly. These kids are absolutely, positively, I don't want to say fucked, but as somebody that has dealt with post traumatic stress myself, and not related to any sort of violent sort of thing, but from somebody that had to sit and stew with post traumatic stress for decades and feel what that feels like and have to live with the anxiety and the worry that every time you hear a pop or something like that, you're just going to immediately get flashes to that day where you were fearing for your life. It doesn't have to be a pop. Like when you learn firearms training and you learn to shoot and everything like that, you learn to recognize certain cues. Like I know what a 9mm sounds like. I know what a 5.56 or a 5.67, which is the standard round for an AR-15, sounds like. I know what a 7.62 sounds like. That's a standard round for an AK. I know what a 45 sounds like. So, and we'll get into that a little bit here in a second. But every time that you hear a pop, something that isn't even like a gunshot, you're going to be taken back and flown back. And this is going to take months and years of active, I would think active therapy to get these kids to a semi-coherent state. And by law, I think the districts are supposed to require grief counseling and everything like that. There are resources that are available to students, but like one decision by one person that was, bullied or hurt or that sort of thing is now going to reverberate and cause hundreds of kids to have to wake up at night in cold sweats and have to deal with issues on the 4th of July when fireworks are going off, and it sounds kind of like a 9mm round because that's something that you see a lot with soldiers as well. They can't do well on the 4th of July because it sounds like gunshots, and these kids are going to cry and they're going to be inconsolable and anxious and stuff like that. And that's who you've got to think about in these situations. Think about those kids and pray for them. And then we get to the part where we can talk about the coverage of these sort of issues. If it bleeds, it leads. That's a big saying in, news media and stuff like that. But it is shameful, absolutely deplorable, the amount of attention that these news outlets put on not the kids, not the victims, but the killers. I don't even know who committed this act, and I don't want to know. I think that person was very disturbed, borderline disgusting. As a, Christian, I don't want to say that anybody is like disgusting or filthy or anything like that, but this person was deeply, deeply troubled. But the point is that we shouldn't be putting the focus on them because that's where copycats will start to come in and say, "Hey, my life is kind of shit. This person's life was shit. I don't feel like I have any motivation to live anymore. Let me go take out a couple more people and at least I'll get my name in the news and people will know me after I'm dead." So, yeah, I read somewhere that today's kids would be considered psychopaths by the standards of the 1960s, like from all the stresses and trauma. I don't doubt it. Not in the slightest. So, and I want to echo or I want to follow that up with having worked with teens and work with young adults myself personally. I want to just echo how strong they are. That these kids hold it together so well. And I know that they're hurting and they know that they're trying to put on a pretty face and everything is fine and stuff like that. But like, I can only be there when they do want to open up about those sort of things. And some kids just don't open up because it's a defense mechanism. But like, while kids would be considered broken and damaged by those standards in the 1960s, I think even looking back at like the 2000s or the 2010s, I was in high school in 2010. 2012 is when I graduated. By that standard, kids that had to deal with all this sort of stuff, I consider them brave. Like by my standards, the standards that I was held to, these kids are far and away more adjusted, they're braver, they deal with a lot more than we do. So let's turn that rhetoric on its head and maybe not think of them as psychopaths, just maybe like super super people. And I'm not saying that. I mean, it's a very good observation. It's an alarming observation. It's something that we should talk about. But in the other side, it's like, yeah, you would be considered mad back in the day because of all the stuff that you had to go through and trauma and stuff like that. So bravo to Gen Z and Gen Alpha. They hold themselves together so well, and I think they've come together through like the pandemic and stuff like that. Gen Z and Gen Alpha are very, very good at making community very, very quickly. Like they take care of each other, they take care of their own, and I fuck with that heavy. I really do. And so, yeah, but what I don't fuck with heavy is the amount of attention that the news outlets put on the killers and the perpetrators in these sort of events. Their names are always plastered across, their faces are always plastered across. They've got interviews with the parents, as these parents are obviously reeling from the fact that their kid is a psychopath and they just killed however many people and they want to have interviews and it all goes the same way. It's like, we never saw this coming. He was such a good boy, such a good girl, that sort of thing. And so why are you putting all this focus on this person and giving the opportunity for like copycat killers to come in and say, yeah, I think I'm going to go off some people because I hate living. I remember in New Zealand when the shooting happened at the synagogue. I can't remember which one, but the Prime Minister of New Zealand, I forget her name, is she was incredible. I think her name is Jacinta. Let me look it up real quick. So, Prime Minister of New Zealand. It was Christopher Luxton. Before it was Jacinda Ardern. Jacinda Ardern. Love her to death. I obviously don't live in her country, so I can't judge her politics, but she got on, and this shooting happening in Christchurch, I think it was Christchurch, New Zealand. This guy opened up fire in a synagogue or a mosque, I can't remember. She got up and she said, this individual, she never named him by name. She just said, this individual, we're not going to talk about this, that, and the other. And you'll notice that, alarmingly, New Zealand doesn't have nearly the level of gun violence that America does. There was just a stabbing in London about a couple weeks ago, and we had Sky News turned on. My dad likes to watch international news in the morning. I came down, and they just had the portraits of the two victims. They're smiling and beaming, and it's like, let's put the focus on the victims and the people that lost their lives. They never mention by name the person that caused the act or anything like that, because they don't deserve it. They don't deserve the media attention, because the media attention will breed copycats and it will breed notoriety and it will continue to allow, or it will continue to reinforce in the psyche of the world that, or of the news cycle, that if we just get a hold of this person, we make them out to be an absolute pariah, so that at home, Glenda or Mike and Sally are just at home clutching their pearls and, oh, woe is me. They will stay tuned in for hours upon hours, and we can sell all these fucking ads and make all this fucking money because these kids just died, and we can talk about the person that killed them for 3 hours, and then we're going to make our bank. Are you fucking kidding me, dude? Like, that's deplorable. So, again, I don't know if there's a solution to these sort of things, but in my head, the solution is Firstly, there should be laws against that sort of thing. And I know that there are laws on the press. The FTC is a thing. Libel and slander laws are a thing. So don't tell me that we can't regulate the press. We certainly can, and we have forever. It's not a First Amendment issue anymore. The press has been so heavily regulated. And also, the First Amendment is basically words on a paper at this point with how much it's been adjudicated and leveled and everything. It should be a civil, if not a criminal offense, to put this much amount of attention on the person that commits these crimes. Especially, also, this has been proven in Japan as well. In Japan, if you have a juvenile felon or a juvenile offender, their identity is sealed. The news cannot touch that. Their names cannot be disseminated. You can't talk about juvenile offenders because that's just a thing. They do it in Japan, and so you'll hear a lot about these issues with like juveniles in Japan, and it's always boy A or boy B or person A or person B. They never mention the name because I don't know what their reasoning is. One, it's probably a privacy thing to protect the identities of these young people, but two, it's good for the society. We don't need to be putting notoriety on killers. We don't need to be putting fame on killers and people that perpetrate these crimes. Yeah, I hate as much. Dude, I'm pissed too. I hate as much how much this has become a meme at this point too. So Rocket, this is a cathartic thing for you and me both. We're just yelling this out, and I hope everybody else can hear that we're yelling this out. If you are frustrated, if you are just pissed off, like we say something about it. Like let your voice and your agitation be heard. And I love that even through all these kids that are broken and anxious and having to deal with body image issues and if they're loved and if they're cared for. And if you're one of those people, know that you are loved and you are cared for. And there's people in this world that think you're fantastic. I don't think I've ever met you before, but I probably find you to be a fantastic human being because there are some of us out there that still think that way, that aren't trying to stab you in the back. But when and this really gave me a thing as well because I was thinking about this as well. I was thinking about the shooting that happened in Florida. And it's weird because like I'm getting them all mixed up now. I shouldn't have to get these things mixed up in my head, ladies and gentlemen. Like there shouldn't be a list long enough for me to mix these things up. I was like, was that Sandy Hook? No, Sandy Hook was the elementary school. What was the name of this one in Florida? The fact that I'm getting confused because there are just so many school shootings at this point, that frustrates the hell out of me. That pisses me off, actually. But these kids, they went and they protested and they lobbied and they fought the NRA. And I don't know if anything came out of it, but they got up and they protested and they called BS. That was like the one cry that this leader, this one girl, she was like the leader of the protest movement. She said, "We call BS." And I thought about that and I hear her even in my head. It's like, yeah, we call BS. And if you're unfamiliar, if you live outside the United States, long story short, our government, you have these groups. They're called lobby groups. They pay lots and lots of money. The name comes from literally they would stand in the lobby outside of where Congress would meet and they would try and tag Congress people as they came out. The American lobbying system is well known the world over, but in case you've never heard of it before, that's what it is. Basically, you have individuals from large interest groups, big pharma, big guns, all these different big words. So people would put a lot of money into funding these individuals to take these Congress people out to lunch and to, kind of fund their campaigns and really get in their good graces. So then when it came law time, these laws that were good for their business or good for that sort of thing would just kind of slip in and go unnoticed. So that's called lobbying. And one of the biggest lobbies for the guns and firearms industry is the National Rifle Association, or the NRA. And I'm not going to talk about the NRA because they are very litigious and they are very poised. They know what they're doing. And I'll be honest with you guys, there was a time living in Texas that I did go through a gun phase. I had a couple guns myself. We'll talk about that in a second. And I signed up for a year for the NRA, and all that got was a bunch of really like fear-mongering voice messages on my phone. And then I got this little tote bag that I would use to carry my ammo to the range and everything like that. But that's about all I got out of the NRA. However, just in the name of full disclosure, the NRA does put a lot of money into gun safety and gun education as well. So every time you go to the range, there's probably an NRA placard that tells you the 3 rules of gun safety. That is to treat every gun as if it was loaded. Don't paint anything. Don't paint a target. Basically, don't like pass a firearm over something that you don't intend to shoot at. So don't be like flailing your firearm around, everything like that. So treat every gun as if it's loaded. Don't paint targets, or don't like swing your gun around, and then practice good trigger discipline. That was basically it. I'm sure there's other parts of it as well, but those were the big 3, if I'm remembering correctly. So that's the thing. The NRA has made it impossible through litigation, at least for right now, for us to have a centralized gun database. Basically, a centralized database with all the serial numbers for and where they're registered and who they purchased to and everything like that. That doesn't exist. It's alarming to some people outside of there. Like, wait, you don't have a central database where all the information about these guns is housed? And yeah, we don't. It's all on paper. And in the interest of full disclosure as well, whenever you buy a firearm, you do have to go to a FFL or a federal firearm license. I can't remember what the term FFL stands for, but basically every gun store that sells guns has to be vetted by the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Association or Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. That's what it is, ATF. And so whenever you're purchasing a firearm, you fill out an FFL form. It basically has your information. They do a quick background check. The FFL will call the I can't remember if it's the ATF or another body, and they'll say, hey, I'm trying to get a release for this, or I'm trying to sell this gun. Here's the name, all the information. And depending on your state, there are mandatory waiting periods. In Texas, as you can imagine, there is no mandatory waiting period. I can go in and buy a gun as long as I pass the FFL, then I can walk out with that gun same day. I've done it. So, yeah. And I'm doing all this to illustrate that this is not a gun issue. This is not a gun control issue. And I know it sounds like gun control and the gun lobby is one of the first things that people point out when these sort of things happen. But gun laws don't prevent bad people from getting guns. Gun laws prevent good law-abiding citizens from getting guns. And I'm not saying that to be like super duper red or super duper blue, that sort of thing. This is not a political issue. This is a human issue. Human lives were lost today. Some of these kids, they weren't even Republican. They weren't Democratic. It wasn't like this person was targeting exclusively Democratic, exclusively Republican kids. Hell, half these kids probably can't even vote at this point. So this is not a political issue. Human rights, human people died today. Human blood was spilled on account of a human action. So this is not a political thing. This is not a gun control thing. I have I'm not a crack shot, but I can put rounds on a target 50 yards down and get a pretty good grouping. And I've always ascribed to the Atticus Finch kind of model of gun control that Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird, there's a scene where he picks up a rifle and takes down a rabid dog. The guy doesn't know any guns, but he's a crack shot because he knows the means by which to operate a firearm in the case that it is needed, but he doesn't actively pursue the ownership and sporting of firearms. And I think shooting sports can be good. I think there is a proper way and a safe way to teach gun safety and that sort of thing. And I don't want to take away people's rights to have firearms. But at the same time, if you look at gun culture around the world, there are places that have very lax gun laws and there's people that have very strict gun laws and they don't have nearly as many school shootings or gun violence as we do. So it can't be a gun control issue. This is a human rights issue. And I think it has to deal with how we are painting and how we are creating notoriety for all these killers. I think it comes from people not checking in and being, helping out people that might be in need. Because I don't need to look at the news story to know this kid was probably troubled, or whoever did this was probably a troubled individual. They're probably struggling with anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, dissociative identity disorder, previously known as bipolar disorder. Um, there's probably just a whole slew of things. They were probably bullied. They were probably abused. The type is there. We have seen it time and time again. And I can't solve bullying overnight. Believe me, if I did, I could. Or if I would, I could. And so, all that's to say, think about the kids. Pray for the kids. Pray for the teens. Because they are about to go through months and years of post traumatic stress and trying to deal with the fallout from this sort of thing. Don't think about the killer. Don't give this killer another day in the sun. Don't give him another piece of notoriety. He should be person A, he should be person B. And shame on any news organization that wants to lead off or tee off with these sort of things because they are literally merchanting blood. They could care less if 100 kids died as long as they can get the lead and they can get people to tune in and clutch their pearls and so they can sell fucking pharmaceuticals or whatever people are advertising on mainstream news nowadays. As long as they get paid, it doesn't matter if kids die, which is pretty fucking terrible. And then finally, realize that this isn't a political issue. This is going to be solved by one party or the other. This is a human issue that has human tolls, and people need to come together as humans to fix it. And the way that we do that is that we look out for one another. We be good human beings to one another, and we care for one another. We check in, look at the people on the corners, Look, corners and doors, that's what they tell you. Muffin, if you're still around and you remember your close quarters training or stuff like that, they always say that corners and doors, that's where people hide. Corners and doors, that's where they'll get you. It's always when you're sweeping an area or, engaging in an area, the person that's going to get you is going to be the one in the corners and the doors. But it's also true about people in real life too. The people that are hurting the most are probably near a corner or they're near a door and they want to get out or they want to not be seen. So go see them, talk to them. And even if they don't want anything to do with you, even if they're adversive or standoff or anything, it's just like, hey man, just letting you know that I'm here. If you need to talk, let's do it. That part, that seeing that person in that moment, it can keep kids from dying. It can keep kids from going in the next day and shooting up there in school. I've seen it. I've seen the difference that engaging with people can make, how it can transform people, how it can bring people to tears, just being able to be seen by somebody. So you don't want to do it before it's too late. Um, or you want to do it before it's too late. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm molding into cliches because this is the part of the time where I've gone to the end of my thought, but I still want to fill the open air. So I start throwing out cliches and banal sort of platitudes to try and fill the air. But yeah, be good to one another. Check the corners. Check the doors. See where people are hurting and check in on them. And speaking of checking in, let's talk a little bit about some Mechanyx updates. So I've got some of those today. Let's take a look over here. Let me get my Mechanyx page pulled up. A little bit of a change up for you guys today. Today we're going to focus a little bit on For Hire. So For Hire is getting a little bit of a rework. And if you guys aren't familiar with For Hire is one of our kind of the collection of services that we have for artists. And as you know, Mechanyx services creators, we service viewers, we service artists, and we service esports. The artist side of things hasn't gotten a whole lot of love lately, but let me show you what we've been working on. So previously, whenever you would click on artists, you would have kind of the search page and you can see where you can actually find people. But as of right now, For Hire doesn't really have a whole lot of people, so a search engine or a search area to find people is kind of tricky. It's more so that people are using it to use the tools on the back end to engage with clients that they already have versus become discoverable from that. So we're probably going to put this on the shelf for just a little bit, this search feature, at least until we get a little bit more people in the way of artists and that sort of thing. But with that in mind, let's take a look at the reworked For Hire backend and what you artists can expect in the coming weeks as far as overhauls and UI updates and all sorts of other cool stuff. So as of right now, you kind of have this. This is the For Hire management page. Everything is kind of all bunched into this one area, and it's very confined. It very much only fills up this part. And you may have noticed that on Mechanyx, we've been trying to flesh things out or use a little bit more real estate. So compare this to this. And in addition to kind of the tweaks that we've been making to Mechanyx's UI as well, we also want to kind of start everything on a certain page. So on Mechanyx Mechanyx Esports, you'll notice that you have the change in logo and everything looks a little bit different. But what populates down here is very much esports themed. And when you're on the home page, it's very much like, hey, here's just everything that's happening on Mechanyx. Here's your update and your feed. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But for artists, now the artists are going to get that look as well. So when you come in here, everything is kind of in one place and you can centralize and get everything that you need. So along the left side here, you can see client management, invoices, offerings, and I also reworked the For Hire checklist as well. So as you're going through, you'll be able to check on things that you've finished and make sure that your profile is in tip-top shape. But as always, you guys know about invoices and those sorts of things. You can still come in and do invoices, start your own invoice, and get paid all securely and safely through Mechanyx and using the same very flexible fee structure that we have for our donations where you can do roll in or add-on. But the thing is here, now everything is confined into one space, so you're not having to jump around and see a whole bunch of different pages. So UI reworks coming to For Hire. Lots of cool stuff happening on the back end for esports as well. We're going to be launching some new stuff with Brick City here in the next couple weeks. I have a call with Muffin here really, really soon that I'm super stoked for. So Muffin, if you're sticking around, I am super stoked for our meeting this coming weekend. And I'm going to have a lot more cool stuff to show you guys. But yeah, just new UI reworks for Hire. I've been just working on some of that stuff and back end stuff. So nothing super sleek and sexy, nothing groundbreaking at the moment, but get everything a little bit more organized and a little bit sleeker for you guys who use For Hire. And that is your Mechanyx update. So 39, 20. Look at me being so prompt and getting all my timestamps done. that we'll jump into the actual fun part, or the bulk of what we're going to be talking about today. So, today I wanted to talk a little bit about, or continue the story that we had from last week. So last week, in case you guys missed it, but it looks like not many of you guys missed it because the part one of the whole history of Mechanyx GG is doing really, really well on on YouTube. It's one of the better performing videos. So a lot of you guys have watched after the fact and come to hear the story. So thank you. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble about the start of Mechanyx GG in my early life. But based on that performance, it sounds like you guys really, really enjoy story time with Drew and talking a little bit about the experience of starting up Mechanyx GG and all the cool stuff that's come along with that. So we're going to continue that conversation today. And today I wanted to break open a couple questions, or not a couple questions, but a couple do's and don'ts. And if you guys have questions, obviously drop them in the chat. I'm just an open book, but I have accumulated a lot of knowledge since starting to build code and really look at doing the entrepreneurship thing back in 2013. So I've been at the game for about 10 or 11 years. I've picked up a lot of knowledge, not just on the coding and programming side of things, but also, and what we're going to talk about today, more on the business side of things. And I want to share that with you guys and hopefully save you guys a little bit of money, or maybe get you inspired to maybe try your own entrepreneurial venture. So these are the do's and don'ts, the don't make the same mistake that I did sort of stories of Mechanyx GG and Ais4Drew and all the fun shenanigans that I've gotten into along the way. So we're going to have these kind of in order. First one will be a do, then a don't, do, then a don't, do, then a don't, and so we'll alternate. So we're going to start with a do. And the first do that I wrote on here was, where are my notes? Perfect. Do, give it a shot. So a lot of people they have this idea, they have something that they want to do. They're like, hey, maybe one day I'd like to hang my own shingle, or maybe one day I want to start my own business. That's great. But then you kind of get drawn into well, I have this responsibility and that's responsibility. And those are good things to keep apprised of as well. But at some point, you're going to be thinking to yourself, it's like, yeah, maybe I should give this a try, or maybe I can give this a try. And I hope that I can inspire you today to, first and foremost, just give it a shot. Like, the worst that could happen, I mean, there's a lot of ways that it can go south, but you will know before it's going really, really south, and you'll be able to pull out most likely. So don't think that when you get into business, or you're going to start like your own business, that you're going to have to pour all this money and you're going to have to basically risk the farm on this venture. There are little things, that you can test out to get your feet wet and see if entrepreneurship is the thing for you. And those will tell you if you're kind of cut out, or if it's going to be a good thing that you want to put more time into, or maybe one of those things where it's like, yeah, maybe I'll try something else, or maybe I like just kind of working and doing my own thing. And that's totally fine too. In case nobody has ever told you, entrepreneurship and being a leader, or being a leader in a leadership role, is not for everybody. It is a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of dealing with people. Some people don't like to deal with people, namely software engineers, or really engineers in general. We all get into engineering because we don't want to deal with people, and then we get into our jobs and we have to deal with people. But when it comes to managing teams and, being responsible for people and productivity and all those kind of soft skills, some people, that just isn't their jam, and that's perfectly fine. They're very competent, very kind of nose to the grind people that make a very good living doing engineering and that sort of stuff. But for me personally, I like leading people. I like the idea of, owning a company, or like being a part of a company or an organization where I'm leading people to do the best work of their lives and that sort of stuff. And that really puts a pep in my step. So I am more cut for that leadership kind of role. But we need to work away from this sort of syllogism, or this sort of root idea that to be a follower is to be a sheep, or to be lesser than somebody that is a leader. It just means that you're built for something different. Some people are really, really good at following, and they can be really, really productive. Every leader needs good followers, and all followers need a good leader. So we are equivocal in that way. It's just leaders have a lot more responsibility and stuff thrust on them. So sometimes they are compensated, or they are given more attention because of that fact. But that doesn't mean that followers or people that work are any less important than people that lead, because leading is still work too. So they're equivocal. Being a leader and being a follower, they're the exact same thing. So, but let's say you are kind of a leader personality and you want to do it, go for it. I think the best way that you can get started, especially that if you're young, is just start a small hustle. I remember there was a kid named Brady that went to my high school, and we had Brady's Candy Store. Brady's Candy Store, there was a 7-Eleven right next to the high school that I went to. Every morning, 6:30 a.m., right before school would start. School started at 7:30. Brady would be at 7-Eleven loading up. He'd buy Skittles, he'd buy Starburst. He would take requests from people as well. That's going to come into the notion of like listening to your customers. We'll talk about that in a second. But he would listen to people and he would get like special requests. I don't know if he paid a little bit extra, but like it would be nice if you said, "Hey Brady, can you get me some Reese's cups tomorrow? Like if you bring me Reese's cups, I'll pay you double or whatever." So Brady was an entrepreneurial guy. And so Brady would load up his backpack. He would have his regular backpack, then he had this black backpack that he carried in front of him, and that was Brady's candy store. And in the hallways, every single day, you'd go to Brady and you get your Skittles. I bought a bag of Skittles from him a couple times. People have bought candy and stuff like that from him too. So Brady was doing his hustle. He got a feel for, hey, maybe is this thing for me? So if you are young, let's say you're taking point and you're in high school or in college, one of the best ways to start is just like selling something small. Sell like you can get candy really, really cheap at the gas station or that sort of stuff. People don't want to go to the vending machine. You can just be right there and say, hey, man, you're going to pay $2 for it over here, but I'll sell it to you for $1 here, and at least I'll give you a smile and a fun story while we're doing our business. So people like stuff like that. People actually like to interact with people and to do a little bit of wheeling dealing in business, and they like to support the entrepreneurship side of things as well. So yeah, people will recognize the hustle. So try something small. Even if it's not that, you could try washing people's cars. If the booster club at whatever dance club can do it to raise money for their spring trip, then you can do it on the sort of thing. But more than anything, a good hustle is always built around helping people. This is something I'm going to tell you, and this is going to be a do a little bit later, but when you put value into the world, the money will follow. Always put value. Make sure whatever you're doing puts value into the world, and then you'll never have to worry about money. In fact, it's the other way around where you get into trouble. It's where you're trying to make money, and then you'll say, like, hey, I'm going to create some value later. That's when you're going to be broke and not have anything. So I really don't want to turn this into like a course or anything like that. I'm giving you all this information for free, but if it becomes kind of cringy or it's going to sound like I'm one of those alpha male gurus or whatever, as I'm sitting here in a muscle tank. Probably not helping my case, but yeah, what I give for free, and don't take this as like gospel advice or anything like that. There's the great thing about the free market is there's a lot of different ways to make an egg. So yeah, but the way that you'll figure it out is just trying with something small. Try a little hustle, maybe sell some candy, wash some cars, do that sort of thing. Get a feel for interacting with people. Get a feel for building rapport and talking to people and being genuine with people. Nobody likes a sleazy salesman or somebody that's just going to tell you all the nice things that you want to hear just to get a sale. Be genuine. Connect with people. Build genuine rapport. Ask them how their kids are. I was actually just writing customer service training for the chess center that I work at, and the level that you want to get to, and this is what I say in the training as well, the level that you want to get to is what I call the how you mom and them level. How you mom and them is a saying that we have here in the South. It's how is your mom? How is your family? How's your mom and them? So your mom and them being your family. If you can ask that of somebody, that means that you're on a very personal level and they're ready to share like the personal comings and goings. And you can use this on your church buddies. You can use this on your friends. You can use this whatever. So the point is that you have to have a rapport there to have that kind of personal interaction to be able to ask those personal questions, but you don't get there overnight. You have to build rapport and you have to ask them and you have to get to know them and stuff so that they open up. And that's a big part of business is just getting to know people and trying to find out what their problems are and then solving those problems. But they're not going to tell you what their problems are until you start building rapport and everything. So you have to get a feel for that. You have to get a feel for what do I charge? You know, am I making money? Am I losing money? Is my time being valued correctly? Am I losing money on time and labor? So balancing all these sort of things. And you can do that as like a small hustle, like with small hustle, put $100 into just like, you could say, hey, I'm going to put away $100 and, you know, I'm going to go through $100 worth of like candy. I'm going to, well, maybe not $100 worth of candy, but it's like, I got $100 here to start out with. Maybe I'll spend $10 today, just buy some little bit of candy. Let me see if I can move $10 worth of candy. And if that works, you come back when you've got $20. And so you put that $20 in and now you're at 110. So it's like, all right, now let me try and move $20 worth of candy today. And maybe you have a really, really good day and you make $30 that day. Point is that $100 there that you started with is a little bit of a pad, but if you go through it every single day and you run out of money and you haven't padded or haven't gotten above that $100, then that's probably not the hustle or it's probably just not for you. And again, that's okay. But yeah, there are all these little hustles, these little things, these little products, these little things along the way that you can do and try and sell in order to figure out if it's for you. But you have to give it a shot. So rule number one, give it a shot and start with something small. Don't feel like you have to sell the whole farm or mortgage your house. Start with something small and build up from there. I'm actually doing this with Mad Lad right now. got some really, really great feedback from some amazing individuals. Trey, I was talking about this last week. Trey and Daniel down at the Guitar Sanctuary took some guitars in there. They picked them apart, and they said, "Hey, man, go back to basics. Build a guitar to specification. Build something that basically build a Stratocaster to the dimensions of a Stratocaster, like the way that it's meant to be built, and see how everything fits together and why things are the way that they are." But along that way, I was thinking, like, man, I really haven't paid my dues to the point where people are going to pay multiple thousands of dollars for my guitars yet, but maybe along the way as I'm, going back to basics and learning these sort of things, I'm probably going to have to make a couple guitar bodies. Maybe I'll move some of those guitar bodies. Maybe I'll sell some of those guitar bodies and make a little bit of money. And so, yeah, you're kind of rethinking and retooling. And so you just, those little incremental things, those little things, those quick nickels that you can sell along the way, those will really give you a feel for if the industry is there, if your market need is there, and that sort of stuff. And this isn't going to be like a discussion about how to start a business plan or identify market like movers and like market needs and stuff like that. That's something else that you can learn another time. But point is, just give it a shot. Give a hustle a shot, try something a little bit, see if you got the entrepreneurial bug in you. And if you don't, that's okay too. More than likely, you'll just get really, really good at the thing that you do as a job, and you'll be making good money there too. So that's the first do. Give it a shot. The first don't, and this is very, very specific to my instance, and I'm going to open this up as well. This is the first thing that kind of floats to my head where it's like, if I could change anything back in the day, this is what I would do. Patents, specifically software patents. There was a lot of stuff that I didn't know about patents back in the day. I think I saw one YouTube video where I was like, hey, you need to patent your stuff. And the guy went through the process to file a provisional or a non provisional patent. And so I won't get into all of the details of patent law, but basically, there are two main bodies in patent law. There's the USPTO, the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and there is the PTC, the PCT, the Patent Cooperation Treaty. The USPTO has jurisdiction here in, hold on, I'm making my note here as well. Let's say 50 minutes and then 50:01 is when we start talking about patent. Cool. So the USPTO has jurisdiction of patents here in the United States. The PCT basically states that, hey, if this patent holds in one country, we're going to hold it here elsewhere. That's the very, very like baseline for it. So whenever you file a patent, you usually have to file in the USPTO, but you also file with PCT and you elect which nations that you want it to be put in. And for each one of those nations, you need to have an agent. And an agent means just a patent attorney that is experienced in that jurisdiction. And quickly, you can start to see that things are going to add up. But nobody tells you how quickly they're going to add up. So to give you guys some perspective, we did look to get a patent for Food for Group. And I think I still have it somewhere. I have the non-provisional thing. You can file non-provisional patents. There's a couple different types. You can file a non-provisional patent that's kind of like like a startup patent, like not a startup patent, but like a kind of toe in the water, let's like feel it out sort of patent. Basically, kind of putting your idea on the books with the USPTO. Whenever you do your provisional or your non-provisional patent, you will also get what's called a priority date. A priority date is a legal term to mean that this document was filed on this day. Henceforth, if this patent were to hold, like if we were to grant this patent later down the road, it would have jurisdiction as of this date. So if I filed a non-provisional in 2015 and my full provisional patent was granted in 2020, I could then say from 2015 to 2020, I had jurisdiction or I had patent rights for this. And there's some other stuff that you can do as well. You can put people on notice and say, hey, we currently have a provisional date or a priority date for this patent. You seem to be in violation of it. If we are granted this patent, then we will be seeking legal recourse. So the priority date will give you a lot of stuff as well. And again, I told you that I wasn't going to get into patent law, but this is kind of it. The thing is that, especially with software in particular, your ideas and your platform and your product are going to shift monumentally, especially within the first couple of years where you're really developing. You're going to pivot, you're going to change your idea based on feedback, you're going to do all these sort of things. A patent is a very, very slow, very staunch document. You need to be very, very firm and very, very specific about the things that you are looking for. You can't just patent things very generally. So all these things are flying around. You're changing your product, this, that, and the other. You may have filed a non-provisional patent or an idea for something that you had in 2013, but since then you have changed and now your idea is completely different. So that patent and all the money that you spent on it, whether it's granted or not, may not be pertinent anymore. And this is exactly what happened with Food for Group. So I had an idea, or I saw a video where it's like, hey, file a non-provisional patent. Here's how you do it. And I thought, okay, cool. Again, being in that kind of vision, we'll talk about another don't here, don't get lost in the titles. I'm like, I'm a CEO and all these other companies have patents, so we need to get a patent. That's just going to be another feather in our cap. Patents are fucking expensive. Like, I think on the total, I spent, or I should say, me and my dad spent, we went halfway on it. My dad, bless up, was super duper nice to be able to split the cost on what would be a very, very expensive learning lesson in my instance. Um, Cumulatively, about 20 grand to just get this patent in front of the US Patent Office and for them to tell us, yeah, this isn't original. We can't patent this. 20 grand to get to that point. And I'm sitting here and I'm fuming because, well, I don't want to say that I'm fuming, but it's frustrating because, and this is no fault of their own. I'm not naming names. I'm not going to talk about the attorney that I use. I'm not going to talk about the firm that I use. I don't even know if they're still in business because I was kind of just so frustrated that I never really looked into it again. But it was a lot of money, and patent attorneys in general don't really know, especially if they're not in your certain area. What'll usually happen, or what makes good patent attorneys, and what you'll see a lot of patent attorneys are, is hey, I have a bachelor's in engineering. I worked in the industry for a little bit, then I went to law school and I got my patent, or my JD, and now I do patent law. And let's say they were a mechanical engineer. I just am really, really good at patenting like mechanical drawings and mechanical devices and stuff like that. But I don't know anything about electrical engineering. I don't know anything about circuit design. I don't know anything about software engineering. I don't know anything about algorithms and stuff like that. So I could tell you if something is patentable or not, maybe kind of sort of in the mechanical field. But again, everything is changing every single day. You don't know what else is being patented out there. So really, patent attorneys don't have there's just so much breadth and so much changes every single day that really the only people that know what can be patented is the USPTO, the United States Patent and Trademark Office, because they're the ones that are granting it. And they have the examiners and everything in there to do it. So a patent attorney is basically just the person that kind of like counsels you and prepares the documents and files on your behalf and everything like that. But in some cases, I would think that an idea, like if I came in and said, hey, I want to patent the idea for a fishbowl, a patent attorney will probably be able to say, yeah, you're not going to be able to patent the idea for a fishbowl. But if you came in and say, hey, I want to patent the idea for a filter that cleans your fishbowl, it's like, okay, maybe we're getting somewhere. But this is nobody's fault, and I'm not pointing any fingers and stuff like that, but like at the outset, I should have known myself that what we were trying to patent was very, very generic. The nuances between it and other patents that existed at the time, like, were almost non-existent. And so, yeah, but I got it in my head. It's like, oh, it'd be really, really romantic. I'm trying to make sure that I'm not like nip slipping over here. There we go. So TOS says that guys can be shirtless on stream, so I'm not worried about that. But just like, I'm trying to be decent, y'all. I'm trying to, yeah, I've kind of walked into that one. But anyway, I really wish I would have like been beside myself and said, hey, maybe this is really, really generic. Like, I'm probably not going to be able to patent this. And I wish somebody else, like maybe my patent attorney, but I don't fault them for not doing this because it's not their job and they don't really know what can be patented and what isn't. I'm just going to kind of come over here. Also, shout outs to Moonstone, really awesome local band. I'm friends with a couple people in the band. This is their shirt, and I just cut the sleeves off. So, yeah, shout outs to Moonstone. Anyway, and no shout outs to my camera dying. That's not cool. But yeah, 20 grand to basically have this generic thing get in front of the USPTO and the Patent Trademark or Patent Cooperation Treaty, and they basically said, hey, this is impatentable. Sorry, see ya. Later come out to find out that to defend a patent, because remember, if you're granted a patent, you have to defend it. You have to make sure that, like, when people are infringing on your patent, you have to give them notice and everything like that. So you just paid however many tens of thousands of dollars to get the sheet of paper that says you have the patent, but now people are maybe possibly infringing on it. And remember, if you don't defend your patent, it can lapse sometimes, and they can say, hey, you had this patent, but you didn't really use it, so we can't fault the person that infringed on it. That happens a lot in trademark law as well. You have to enforce your patent, especially design patents. And so you're combing around there, you see all the other apps that are maybe kind of using your stuff, you're sending them letters, and then that has to, you have to send cease and desist, an attorney has to do that, or a registered agent has to do that, which means that that's billable time. You're going to spend money just to maintain the patent and make sure that people are there, and that's probably tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then I had a friend who did an internship at a law firm. He was an engineer, and he was doing an internship at a patent law firm just to kind of get a feel for it. He told me the average cost to defend a patent successfully successfully in litigation, that is to say in court, you take somebody to court and you sue them for infringing on your patent, $1 million, $1.2 million is the average, or at least at the time, it was the average cost to defend an action item or defend a patent in court. So, as a small business person, as somebody that is, probably going to have their product change in the next 6 months for everything that is in flux and everything like that, and already standing on top of the fact that patents are heavily litigated right now. Nobody except the USPTO basically knows what a patent does anymore. And everything is so litigious and everything is like so up in the air in court. Apple and Samsung are battling it out every single day. All these other big companies are battling it. They're figuring all that out. And that's the most valuable companies in the world. You don't need to mess with that. Unless, and again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an attorney, I'm just a guy. A guy who started a software company called Mechanyx GG and spent 20 grand on a patent that wasn't enforceable. So I'm trying to save y'all money, but you may have the next whiz bang idea. You may have the next groundbreaking algorithm or something like that, in which case you may want to look at patenting it. But 99% of the time, what you have is an iteration on an idea, and that could be valuable. There are plenty of great iterations. We don't still sit in the same four-legged wooden stool that inspired the chair. We're sitting in our gaming chairs. So, yeah, this is an iteration on a chair. This is more comfortable and this sort of thing. They didn't have to patent this design. There may be aspects of it that are patented, but you don't need to have a patent or you don't need to have a corner on an intellectual property to iterate and to create value. In fact, you're going to waste a lot of time and a lot of resources doing just that. So, especially when it comes to software patents, which are always in flux and stuff like that, my advice to you would be think very, very closely about the idea that you have a patent, or if you need a patent, sorry. And 99% of the time, it's probably not. You probably don't need a patent. So save the money. That's my spiel on software patents and all that good stuff. I got an email from Stripe. I'm waiting on notice from their, getting paid. That's nice. Mechanyx is getting a payout. So Stripe is great. You should check them out if you're doing any sort of e-commerce or building e-commerce stuff. So I'm going to make a timestamp as well. Didn't do this with the first one, but this one for sure. So 101:14. So 101:15 is where we are going to be talking about our second do. This is the second thing that you do want to do. Do wait until you have the money to incorporate. Let me break that down as well. I realize that I put this in the do category, but the first word of this statement is don't. But this is something that you do want to do, or you want to get in the habit of. You don't want to spend money until the business justifies the need to do so. And this is especially prevalent when it comes to incorporation. Incorporation is the process by which you register your business as a legal entity. Here in the United States, there's a couple different ways that you can do it. You have sole proprietorships, you have limited liability companies, LLCs, or limited liability partnerships, which is some industries. You have C Corps, you have S Corps, and you have B Corps. And there's some other different classifications as well. There's also 501c nonprofits, all this other good stuff. You are going to be very, very tempted, especially in the early days, to put your name on a paper and say, we are incorporated as this company in the state of Texas, and we registered with the IRS. We've got our EIN number. We can collect sales tax. We're doing great. And then you're going to realize that hustle didn't work or that idea didn't work, and you're going to have to find another thing, and you're going to have to rebrand and do all sorts of stuff. Remember, we started as Food for Group, and then we became Mechanyx GG. Luckily, our company name was innovative enough that we could name our platform after it, but all of our business documents said Mechanyx Codeworks Incorporated, so if we needed to deviate from that, we would be spending a lot more money. It costs on average about $300 to $600 to file a business federally, and with your state and local government, everything is a little bit different. Some areas do it differently, but until you have that $300 to $600 profit in the bank, and I'm not just saying revenue, well, I'm saying profit. You have made $300 to $600 string-free, hands-free on your business. That is when you incorporate, because that's when you know that your business is working and your business needs to be legitimized because the resources have come in that allow you to do that. If you're mowing lawns and you're doing your things, or you're moving your candy and stuff like that, or you're doing a candy shop or washing cars or that sort of stuff, then maybe you're making a couple bucks here and there. You can declare that on your personal taxes and everything as, other sort of income, but it's not at that level yet. It's not that deep yet. When it gets to be that deep, when you are at the level of, hey, now I'm taking on lots of work and everything like that. I've made at least $300, $600. I can spend this money because the business has made this money. I can spend that money on getting incorporated. And there are so many benefits to incorporating your business. First and foremost is you get a lot of legal protection. You have something of a shield. LLCs are a little bit less defensive or a little bit less of a shield than a C Corp or an S Corp is, but C Corp and S Corps require more money and more governance accordingly. So there's kind of a give and take there. But the biggest benefit is that you will be registered, you have a legal defense, or you have an entity that is separate from your own. So heaven forbid something happens or you're sued, they sue the company and not you, and so your personal assets can't be seized most of the time. Again, there are always asterisks, always exceptions. I'm not a lawyer, not an attorney, all that good stuff. But yeah, don't get in the habit of just like incorporating your businesses willy-nilly. You'll be wasting your money. But whenever that business does pop off and you start making money, you're like, hey, yeah, I did make about 300 to 600 bucks today, or 300, 600 bucks. We got that money in the coffers. And again, it's profit. It's not your running cost. You could make $300 and $600, but you spent $300 or $600 and you come out zero. That's great, by the way. That doesn't mean you didn't take on any debt. But when you have made profits, or when the business has generated enough profit to justify the need to incorporate, then that's when you want to do it. So yeah, hold off on incorporating until the money is there and it justifies it. So that was do number 2. Don't number 2. This is something that you don't want to do when you're early on in your days, and something that I got really, really lost in the sauce on. I talked a little bit in the last episode, or the last hang, about how there's a show called Silicon Valley that was on when we were starting Mechanyx Eugene. It's a really great show. It was very, very valuable to Jordan and I because it showed some of the pitfalls and some of the things that go on in our industry, kind of the skeevy stuff, and it made it in a parody. Mike Judge is an amazing writer. He was able to make all these sort of things funny and entertaining for an hour. But a big thing in the Valley is all about these titles. I am the CEO of this new tech startup, or I'm the CTO, I'm the CIO. People get lost in the alphabet soup and like what's on their business card and that sort of stuff. But in the early days when you're just starting a company, just be thankful for the fact that you're there, that you're like in the weeds of it, you're building your product. By far the most entertaining, the most exciting thing, the thing that's going to get you going day after day after day in those early days is building your product. You're going to be sitting there. I did it too. I absolutely destroyed my sleep schedule, staying up till 2 in the morning every single day, working on FFG. And it was just so fun. It's like, what can this thing do? What can we build? What can we do to make it like better? And you're tweaking your product and everything like that. And then you would take a step back. It's like, okay, I have to think about the CEO and the over governance and everything like that. The people that are locked up and kind of lost in the alphabet soup are, I don't want to say nobodies, but they're people that they're not concerned about the right things. They are very much concerned with the title and the prestige and the pretense and the status that comes with those letters. But the real people that are grinding and the people that are going to be successful don't give two fucks about what they're called. I wear a lot of different hats. Like every time I introduce myself, it's either, hey, I'm a co-founder and CEO, or co-founder, lead developer, co-founder and caster, this sort of thing. You're going to wear a lot of different hats in your early days. So don't try and get lost in the titles or like, I'm CEO, no, you're CEO and everything like that. All those arguments, all the time is going to take away from you developing your product, which is going to be the thing that is really, really important. And so, yeah, don't get lost in the alphabet soup. Don't get lost in that sort of thing. There's going to be pretentious people. They're like, oh, you're the CEO or you're the CIO. That's so cool. But they really don't know what you're going through, and they're just like getting lost on the title. They don't know. So, yeah, don't deal with them people. They can be a little bit strange. They're just worried about titles. So, talking about working on your product, the third do, work on your product. So, I talked a little bit about this in the last hang as well, but go work on your product. If you're getting lost in the alphabet soup and like who has what title, that means you should probably go work on your product. If your product is out there, but people are giving you feedback, it's like, hey, this could be better, this is better, or hey, this is just absolute dog shit. Like, then you probably need to go work on your product. Even if your product is making you money, you should go work on your product. If your product isn't creating value, then you need to go work on your product and make sure that it gives you value. If your product creates value, but it could create more value, then go work on your product. Are you starting to notice a theme here? If you're wondering about what you should do next, you should probably go work on your product. If you think that your product is done, you should go work on your product. Your product can always be better. It can always be in just a little bit faster, a little bit sleeker. It could have that just little bit more feedback. So this is the thing that's making you money, guys. Your product, whatever you're selling, it could be a service or it could be a platform. It could be an actual thing that you can hold, like a tangible good. Work on it. Make it better. Be obsessive about the little things. Like tweak every little last thing that you can find. If you can figure out a better screw vendor that can give you screws that are twice as strong at half the cost. That's a really big exaggeration, but like work on those minutia things. There's a part of my brain that just happy chemical go burr every time that I optimize just one little thing. If I can shave off just a little bit of time off of a cycle time when I'm cutting a guitar on my CNC machine for MadLad, or if I could shave off like half a second on a load time on Mechanyx, or if I could reorganize something to be a little bit better, then that makes me feel good. Like that's the good shit right in there. And I feel like a lot of people are that way too. We are programmed to have a reward complex when things give us, you know, or we have a reward complex that's pre-programmed into us that when we see progress, when we see things moving, we instinctively want to continue with that because it gives us a sense of fulfillment. So work on your product, chase down that high, chase down those optimizations, and get into the habit of working on your product and rewarding yourself for those optimizations, even if it's just a little minutia thing, even if you only work on it for like an hour or something like that. That's still an hour better than what you did or what you had yesterday. So those little incremental changes, those are the things that are going to help. So go work on your product. I should make a shirt. I kind of see it in my head already. Go work on your fucking product. Um, and I mean, also, I can going back to it and like the alphabet soup. We were talking about alphabet soup and CIOs and CTOs and everything like that. There will come a time when you do need to organize your company and like delegate roles and everything like that. That is way down the road, by the way. But it's good to have those organizational structures, especially when you start taking on people. I think about Brick City, Talking Muffin. Eric has a very, very good organizational structure. Mechanyx has a somewhat good organizational structure as well, but I only ever organize based on the people that I have. You don't want to start creating roles and creating organizations for people that aren't even in the company yet because you're wasting time. And if you're wasting time, you should be working on your product. So I'm just kidding. But yeah, there will come a time that when you do have those roles and stuff like that, every action that you do on behalf of that role, let's say you're the CEO, all of your actions should also reflect on your product. You can do things as a CEO or a CTO or a CIO that aren't directly working on the product, but also working on behalf of the product, if that makes sense. So when I go out and I talk to streamers or when I'm in stream chats and stuff like that, I'm not directly working on Mechanyx, but I'm building rapport for a potential partnership or a potential sort of thing. So we have launched the product is out there. I'm not working on the product directly in the sense that I'm working on code, but my actions, what I'm doing on behalf of the company or behalf of the product still supports the product. So that in a way is also working on the product. It's not just like working directly on the product. So at every step of the way, even to when you do get to that point where you're organized and you have a cool title next to your name, you're still going to be working on your product. So it's good to get in the habit of working on your product early. So my Instagram is popping off. So cool. Anyway, I just posted a post. Go follow at MadLad Instruments, by the way. If you're not, just posted a picture of a gorgeous new swamp or ash body. I keep wanting to say swamp ash, but it's a regular ash body that I just carved out today. So go check it out. So that was our second do. Don't get lost in the idea of those sorts of, or don't get lost in the titles and that sort of thing. Let me talk about, I'm trying to think of some other do's. But in the meantime, I have a couple don'ts. And this will probably be a multi-part series. So let's see here, 112, 40. Cool. Maybe not a do, but kind of a rule of thumb. There will always be another client. And that could be a two-sided sword. So listen to me very carefully. If you are in a relationship or you are in a professional working relationship or you have a client or a deal that you're working on, and the person just isn't passing your vibe check, maybe they're a little bit abrasive, they're a little bit that sort of thing, there's always going to be another client. Don't waste your time with these sort of people that are going to make you jump through the moon and make you feel bad about yourself and everything like that. Maybe they are providing genuinely good feedback, but if it's personal stuff, if you just don't work well with them, if you don't vibe with them, if they're just not your thing, there's always going to be another client. Like, don't save yourself the stress, save yourself the emotional sort of roller coaster. Go find another client. There's always another client. But what you don't want to get into the habit of is, no, there's going to be another client. We don't need to worry about that. You shouldn't use that as an excuse to provide terrible service to somebody. So if you just absolutely fumble the ball on something that you could have fixed, then you probably want to look at evaluating that situation, seeing what you can do better. If you can get the account back, then do it. Do what you can to do to say sorry and apologize and get those sort of things right. Don't just be like, we fucked that one up. There'll be another client, move on. Because you can do real lasting damage and there can be reputational damage that's going to hurt you later down the road as well. You have to be mindful of that. So, with that in mind, just be mindful of that. There's always going to be another client, but there's always also going to be another client. It can be a double-edged sword. Don't work with people that aren't going to promote you and build you up and, vibe with you and really think that your product is awesome. I talked a little bit about the transition from the Food for Group to the Mechanyx days. Mechanyx has been an absolute dream because the people that I work with are literally retraining me to think that, oh yeah, I can be grateful and people can be genuine and stuff like that. I haven't always had that experience, especially back in the Food for Group days. But I learned that through the Food for Group days. And I think at the time I was like, okay, this is my client. They're my one and only client. I need to hold on to them, or, we're potentially losing this other client. We need to do everything that we can when we just didn't work well together. Sometimes you just don't work well with certain people, or the industry doesn't work, or that sort of thing. You're not working well with the industry or the stakeholders. That's fine. There's always another client. There's always another idea. There's another thing that you can jump to. So with that in mind, get out of those relationships or get out of those professional sort of working relationships because you need to save your sanity. And yeah, take it from me. That's what I'm saying. So yeah, there will always be another client. Don't stick around with people that aren't going to build you up and help you out, or that you're going to vibe with, if that makes sense. So that was 112:41 to 1:15:36. Let me talk about this last one, and this is a big one, and this is one that I'm going to have to be very nuanced on, and then maybe we'll kind of call it there for today. This last, don't. And this is a very big one. This is one that I can talk about for hours. Unless it is your very last option, or your business is doing really, really well, but there's no way that it's going to scale without this, don't take venture capital funding. Let me elaborate on that a little bit. And let me qualify that a little bit, because this is something that I struggle with a lot. I've been kind of doing introspection on myself with this sort of thing. We went out with Mechanyx with the idea that we were going to do everything grassroots. That is to say that me and Jordan and our various shareholders were going to, well, not shareholders, but like people that have helped us out. Your parents help you out with a little bit of funding here and there, that sort of stuff. We want to do everything grassroots. A lot of businesses have done that. I'm not too familiar with too many tech firms that have done it, but like, smaller mom and pop shops, they'll, pull themselves up by their bootstraps and then they're good to go. They do everything grassroots. It's a little bit more difficult to do that with software because software takes years to develop and you have to pivot, and there has to be a lot of expertise in the pool to kind of get you into the place where you're poised and positioned and strategically lined up with the ideas or the visions that you want. And even then, some companies aren't profitable after that. Amazon, as I understand, isn't like making a whole lot of money. Twitch isn't making a whole lot of money. They are not profitable. There are companies that are worth millions of dollars that are hemorrhaging money and they do not make money. They report losses every single year. And that fucking blows my mind because people want to keep throwing money at this sinking ship. But for somehow it's just staying afloat or like that sort of thing and it's still around. It's too big to fail, whatever. Meanwhile, Mechanyx, we have been operating at a loss since basically 2020. We've had some months where we've been in the black and, our revenues have exceeded our expenses. But for the most part, me and Jordan have been trying to break even for the past couple years. We're getting, hopefully, we're working with some people and getting some strategic partnerships to get there. But just goes to show you, we have been in kind of that incubator period for a while. We have a platform, it is launched. We work with some amazing people and everything like that. But we intentionally started small because we didn't want it to blow up. And then if we did a really big partnership with a certain streamer or something like that and they had a bad experience, then we were washed forever. So you start small, you work out the kinks with the smaller streamers that are going to be super duper forgiving, and then you scale up from there. And that's exactly been the case. We've worked with some amazing, small streamers, but also working out the kinks and everything, but also the future should belong to the small people. Everybody else is going to be pining for the super duper big streamers, but what's left for the guys underneath? And if there was going to be a truly revolutionary product that was going to bring those people up to that same level or that same table, it should belong to the small people, right? That's the kind of fluffy part. that was the part that came after, and I'll be completely candid with you guys. The reason that we started small is because of the first part that I talked about, because we didn't want it to blow up and, have a bad experience. But what I quickly learned after the fact, that's what I went into the idea with that insidious, I don't want to say it's an insidious idea, but the idea that, hey, we're going to start small and then we're going to scale up from there. That way, if it blows up, then it's not a big deal. That was kind of the thought. That was the strategic idea. But business is going to impress you. God's going to impress you in some certain ways, because it's like you went in with that idea, and maybe that wasn't grounded in the most like wholesome or value based sort of thing. But then you learn that, hey, actually, this does work. But also, you're building something that's revolutionary. It should help people and stuff like that. So the real reason, the reason that you should have skin in the game in this way is because you want to get that technology to smaller people. So you'll come in with one expectation or one idea, but then the business world will turn you around and give you another more philosophical or a better rooted reason for it, if that makes sense. So yeah. Anyway, the doing everything grassroots, we've been operating kind of at a loss. We're starting small and we're scaling up from there. We're trying to get to a place where we are consistently profitable. And then from there, we have to get to a point where we're consistently profitable on the order of like paying people's wages, because we can't necessarily just hire people, because then we're going to be incurring a bigger expense. People's livelihood are based on that. So you can see how all these kind of things compound, and you can see why venture capital would be a very appeasing idea for a company. You get all these resources taken care of. You can hire these amazing engineers, these young engineers that will give the best years of their life to this product, to this idea. Maybe you have like a CEO or a board that's going to advise you on these sort of things, and you're going to get poised and everything. But I've heard far more horror stories than success stories, and probably the reason for that is because the success stories kind of go under the radar, but there have been plenty, and I mean plenty, of some of the biggest companies in the world that have had their CEOs or their creative controls usurped from their original founders in the name of VCs. Mark Cuban put it very poignantly. I saw one of his ads for his masterclass. When you raise money, that is not a congratulatory moment. That is an oh shit moment. Because suddenly you didn't just make money, you didn't just earn money, you now have a responsibility. You are putting somebody else's money into your pocket. They're going to have expectations for you. And those expectations can be very, very heavy, on the order of, hey, I just want 30 or a majority share of your company, to I'm going to install this person as CEO, and I'm going to, stack your board of directors with people that have my interest in you, and we're going to slowly wrestle away your company. This is exactly what happened with Apple in the 90s when Steve Jobs left, and who was the John Scully? John Scully was the guy that, or Steve Scully, John Scully, the Pepsi guy, the guy who came up with the Pepsi challenge. He took over Apple, or like Apple's board installed him as the CEO. The company was absolute dog shit, and they brought Steve back 10 years later. And I will be very outspoken about Steve Jobs. The dude was a megalomaniacal, narcissistic, manipulative piece of shit. I am not a fan of Steve Jobs. I used to be, but the more that I looked into him, he was an abusive, manipulative person. And the fact that he gets away with most of the stuff that he gets away with is just the fact that he ran Apple, and Apple became this big, beautiful company. But it became this big, beautiful company off of the hard work of the engineers and the design team. Steve just knew how to sell it, and he knew exactly the abusive thing to say to people, just so that they were motivated enough to complete their next project and not quit. So no, you don't lead a company by fear, and you don't lead a company by that. And people that like put Steve up on a pedestal need to really, really not just examine their managerial styles, but also examine their personal styles. Because if you think that's acceptable behavior in a professional environment, let alone a personal environment, I got a bridge to sell you. So anyhow, yeah, not justifying what Steve did, but when came back, Apple kind of turned it around. Everybody was like, "Hey, Steve's back," and all that sort of thing. And now they just release the same iPhone and the same MacBook and everything. So over and over again every year. But I mean, it's what works, and it keeps their shareholders happy, and it keeps money in the coffers. So they kind of just have their infinite money machine, and has a big old Apple logo on the side. Anyway, but yeah, VC funds are very poised to, in the best cases, offer you guidance and offer you resources to be able to fund these sort of things. But in the worst case, they will take your company from you, they will usurp you and throw you out on the curb, and they will think nothing less of it. They will go home and sleep at night comfortably and soundly. And they've gotten really, really good at this. They've had 30 to 40 years to figure this sort of thing out. They know exactly what to write into your contracts and all that sort of thing. You hear about it time and time again. It happened to Apple. It can happen to you. So don't take on that responsibility. Don't let other people come in that, be open to mentorship, be open-minded. You may have somebody that wants to guide you and give you guidance and everything like that. But the minute that person starts asking for ownership stake and, talking about money exchange and stuff like that, you should pause and you should take a step back and be like, hey man, thanks, but I think we're going to try it our own way. In every situation that you can, try to avoid venture capital funding. Now, you may need venture capital funding if you're creating a physical product, like you need to create a product, you need to source materials and stuff like that. But even in that case, try and build a prototype, try and source everything locally, try and get scaled up to a point where you can source those things locally, or you can create a supply chain on your own. That way you're not having to incur the overhead of like factories and employees and all these sort of other things. You don't need to have your product at that super duper scale yet. If anything, when you start producing it in low quantities, you're going to iron out a lot of those kinks and everything, and naturally your product is going to get better because, again, work on your product. But with VC funding, you suddenly just have all this cash and you're going to burn and you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and that's going to cost many thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars of money that you don't own, and somebody else is going to want to get recompense for that. And that's what happens with venture capital. So try and do it on your own. Try and do it grassroots. Venture capital should be the last possible option. Am I the one to ask about this as somebody that's sitting in his home office in his house and doesn't have an office and, is still trying to get his company to consistently profitable every single month? Maybe not. Maybe there's something that I don't know. But I do know that I've seen plenty of stories where VC companies will wrestle stuff away, and I would much rather take the slow burn, much rather build it up and build it the way that I and Jordan and the community want than to have some VC swoop in and try and take what you guys, or take this away from you and put profits back at the center instead of people, because Mechanyx has always been about people at the center, not profits. Let's put people back at the center of esports, not profits, because right now we're in a profit-centered esports world, not that. So yeah, that was our final don't. Look at VC as the last option. Don't take VC funding unless you absolutely have to. And chances are you probably don't have to. And those are some do's and some don'ts. I hope you guys enjoyed the rundown. Like I said, I've got so many other stories and so many other gems of knowledge that I could probably drop onto you guys. So we will be continuing this dialogue for sure. Also, I believe Paige is going to be back next week. We also have an amazing guest lined up for that as well. If you guys are interested in being a guest on the Mechanyx Midweek Hang, you know where to find us, the Discord, !Discord. I will put that in the link below, or in the chat. It will also be down in the description below. That's the best place to get in touch with us and just be on the know for all sorts of things Mechanyx. But I hope this has been valuable, the first part of the do's and don'ts of my experiences with, creating Mechanyx and all that good stuff. So lots of do's, lots of don'ts. I'm trying to give those to you guys so that you can learn from them and don't make the same mistakes that I do. So we'll wrap up today's video in the normal way. Chat, I think we're going to play some games so you guys can stick around, but for now we're going to wrap up the video in the normal way. That's by me saying, always remember that you are wanted, you are loved, and you are appreciated. You have a special talent that nobody else has, and the world is waiting on you to bring it out. So muster a little courage, go out into the world, and change it. That's what the world's waiting on. You. Till next time, friends, we'll see you at the next Midweek Hang. Bye now.